All right, so in game, you technically don't get to see Krillin's face during this cutscene, but rest assured, my dude is cheesing so hard. This is so funny, dude. All right, if you've been paying attention to this channel, I did a video a couple weeks ago on extracting models from Dragon Ball GT Final Bout using a 3D screenshot method. So essentially you can take a point in time and extract a 3D model for it. And you can do the same thing with the DS. And what that allows us to do is kind of get behind the scenes on how things in this game are set up. And so that's what I want to do today. All right, so in that first cutscene, like the introduction into story mode, you see Freeza like charging up his attack that destroys Bardock and Planet Vegeta, but you don't technically see his face. And that's not just because fancy camera magic, it's because he doesn't technically have a head. In terms of special moves, right now, Krillin's getting blasted, getting just kind of nuked by a Kamehameha. But if you're wondering like what that looks like behind the scenes, if we switch to solid, so yeah, just different shapes meant to represent the different elements of the Kamehameha. The more spherical portion has a little tube representing it, and then proper use of sprites allow you to give like the appropriate effect. So that's basically what's happening. And if you go into this axis, you can see that it's mostly two-dimensional. So the three-dimensional aspect is handled by, this tube that's happening right here. So this is what the title screen of Ultimate Butouden looks like on the DS, but if you zoom out a little bit, you'll start to see kind of what's going on here. So essentially, you have your quad that represents like the push to start button, and you can see that the entire Kami's lookout isn't technically modeled out. This is a method of just, saving out processing because, the DS only has a limited amount of 3D memory. And there's also a little bit of like perspective magic going on here. Kami's tower, or like the actual living quarters of it, are pushed back a little bit further towards the edge of the radius of this guy than it should be, like technically speaking. If we're really getting to it, Trunks is probably not proportionate, but like nothing in this game is proportional. You can see some of these trees are like just off the edge. From the perspective that we're at in the title screen, it wouldn't look like it's off, but not everything. Only what needs to be modeled out in the palaces is showing. So very smart design. All right, so this is a stage that has a lot going on with it, but little secret that I don't think that most people are able to catch, but in the background of this stage are the bodies of Bardock and I assume that's Goldo without his head. Oops, scratch that. I think I found another. Yep, there's Riku. Somehow he's made it to the final battle. He's just sitting around. Yeah, I don't know how somebody would like notice this on a DS screen. It's also easier to move him, so I can just pick him up and carry him to safety. All right, so you might be wondering, how does Dragon Ball Kai Ultimate Butouden render scenes that could be like wildly different across the top screen and the bottom screen all at one time? So this, for example, is a cutscene during the What If episode where, Goku dies by Frieza's hand rather than Krillin. And so in this very moment, Goku's being, propelled up into the sky by Freeza. This is kind of what you're seeing in the top screen. And then on the bottom screen, you're seeing Freeza with his hand outstretched. And just to get an idea of how the 3DS renders, you can technically only render 3D to a single screen at a time. But what you can do is mid-frame, you can switch which of those screens you're rendering to. And so in this case, both of the scenes technically exist in one space. So where you see Goku here, if we look over here, that's that right there, that's Freeza. So I can zoom in on him. So that's him doing his job, and Goku's up in the corner, and everything is just in one scene. So there's no, two different scenes or anything. Everything is happening in one space. When they switch to the bottom screen, essentially they just move the camera sort of the way I do. It happens instantly. They can change whatever, field of view, whatever, and they can just render this as they need to. So if you're ever wondering how that was going on, that is what's happening. All right, so this effect that you see in the beginning of the story mode showcasing like Freeza killing Bardock, you can see they're not changing like the styling through any kind of like shader magic or anything. It's literally like embedded into the texture. And they also layer these guys together to kind of give the impression that they need. So you have in the center kind of this orb. Transparency allows it so that when layered together, they give off this like really cool impression. So really cool how they do it. All right, so what you're seeing right here is like the start of every episode or every chapter that you play through in Ultimate Butouden, and you can see like the Dragon Balls floating through the air as kind of predicted. They are, oh, actually that's surprising. So I assume that these would be quads, which is like a texture applied to them. So that kind of makes me curious if I go into edit mode and I sort of, oh, that's very interesting. So these aren't even just like, it's like various different, like the stars are applied separately. This is interesting. I don't know why they do this. There has to be a reason why they would end up doing this for the Dragon Ball. So have I mentioned that the costumes in this game are really great? Like some of these costumes you can see here, Android 18 with Launch's outfit, and you can even add in like custom outfits for your character. So Krillin, his little Dragon Ball chain that you see right here, and his glasses. But it's cool seeing these costumes in full HD in a way that you couldn't see just on like the DS screen, because it looks totally different. All right, so this right here is like my first snapshot from the game. It's from the opening sequence, and immediately like what I noticed, and this is a pretty common technique, is everything is encapsulated in a giant orb that represents the sky. And then in terms of doing like the clouds that are like forming like this parallax effect, it's basically just multiple like 2 layers of planes down on the ground that are moving in different directions. So you can kind of see that in just how these are skewed. You can do that pretty easily by just changing like the tiling on each of these guys. Clouds themselves those are just represented as simple planes, and the effect that you see around Goku for like the key as he's moving is its own separate mesh that's taken advantage of transparency. So that's kind of how they're doing that effect. And then you can see Goku here. I really love like the screenshotting tool, because this is the first time you can get like a super in-depth view of Goku from this game. You can really see kind of like how low poly he is. And this takes a lot of like smart design, but yeah, that's basically for this scene. So move on to another scene. So no surprises here with the character select screen. The characters are actually just right next to each other, which we can show off their wireframe. So again, DS doesn't have a whole lot of resources to work with. So you're gonna get like pretty low poly looking models. But it's really the materials on these guys that make them look really nice. Like the DS, a lot of people compared the DS to the PlayStation, and I would say that the DS edges out in terms of like what it can do with its textures. So this is something that did surprise me. So in the stage select, where they're showing previews of the stages that you can fight on, I just assumed that it would be like a full motion video or something that was playing, but apparently that's more space needed than just actually rendering the stage itself whenever you select a different stage, which probably goes into the reason why it takes a second for that preview to pop up. But yeah, you get a full like look at the stadium before you get there. So this is without any characters fighting. And we also get this guy. So he's a just in the background of the Cell Games stage. You can tell like the texture quality on this guy is like significantly smaller than the main characters, mainly because you're not seeing him up close. You're seeing him like from this perspective, so it makes sense to not give him as many resources. And in terms of like his design, he's pretty much just like a whole bunch of cubes or whatever put together, so he's like not super high poly at all. But still, it's still pretty funny. It's still pretty cool that he's just in here in the first place. But I want to see kind of what the more crazy looking stages look like behind the scenes. You can also see here kind of how they handle like smear frames. So whenever like a character is moving fast, or you can see kind of how they do that smear. It is essentially, so it's its own little object that's in there that kind of follows the character. So if you're wondering how they did like the smear effect, this is kind of how they do it. So like the biggest thing that I'm taking away from doing all these rips is just how much the graphics in this game like hold up, like even for like a DS game, like when you're not viewing it on the tiny DS screen. Because I mean, like the quality of like the models in here looks really good. And this is what's telling me we need like a remake of this game. You don't have to change any of the gameplay, any of the like anything. Just if you could res it up to, you know, this resolution, kind of like I'm viewing it in this model, that would be enough. I think a lot of people would play this game, but maybe that's just me.